Daniel Reyes stood at the edge of an impossible sky. Above him, the heavens cracked like glass under pressure, golden light pouring through fractures in the clouds. Below, an endless abyss churned with shadow. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. All he could do was watch. The air trembled as wings, thousands of them, filled the sky. Angels, radiant and terrible, clashed mid-air with flaming swords, their war cries echoing like thunder across eternity. Feathered halos blazed. Some screamed hymns. Others roared in tongues no human throat could mimic. And at the center of it all, a figure of overwhelming light stood on a crumbling throne of stars. Lucifer. He wasn't horned. He wasn't monstrous. He was beautiful, divine, his eyes, like twin suns, locked onto Daniel, as if he knew he was being watched, as if he saw beyond time. Then the voice came, "I will return." It wasn't spoken. It was planted into Daniel's skull like a seed bursting into flame. He dropped to his knees, ears bleeding, as the sky split apart. A blinding spear of light struck Lucifer, hurling him down. The other angels wept. Some followed him willingly, torn from heaven like falling embers. Others were dragged into the void by chains forged from starlight. Lucifer fell, arms outstretched, not screaming, but smiling. And just before the world went black, Daniel heard it. A baby's cry, soft, fragile, echoing from the pit below. He woke up screaming. The bed was soaked in sweat. His wife, Mia, stirred beside him, half asleep. "Same dream?" she murmured. Daniel could only nod, heart pounding like a war drum. He stared at the ceiling fan spinning like a halo of blades. The sound of it had become unbearable, like wings flapping just out of sight. This had been the 7th night in a row. Always the same dream, always the same voice. He had started documenting them in a journal. The colors of the sky, the expressions of the angels, the symbols glowing on their armor. They weren't dreams. They were memories. Later that day, during breakfast, Mia cradled her growing belly and smiled. "He's been kicking again," she said. "He's gonna be strong." Daniel forced a smile. But inside, something cold curled around his spine. The baby hadn't been conceived during peace. He remembered the night of the dream's first appearance, when they'd made love under a storm that came from nowhere. Thunder that made the windows bleed condensation. Lightning that cracked the sky and sounded like laughter. Daniel stood and placed a hand gently on Mia's stomach. A flutter, a twitch, then something strange happened. His fingertips burned, not a sharp pain, more like static, humming under his skin. He pulled back quickly, trying not to look startled, but the feeling remained, deep in his chest, a sense that something ancient watched from inside. And it had finally noticed him. The sky outside the hospital was black at noon. Clouds hung low like bruises over the city, bloated with storm and silence. Inside St. Mercy General, the lights flickered for the 3rd time in under an hour. The nurses joked nervously about a power surge, but no one could explain the sudden cold in the maternity ward. Daniel sat in the delivery room, eyes darting between the beeping monitor and Mia's sweat-soaked face. She was in labor. Too early, according to the doctor. But the contractions were relentless. Every few minutes, she'd scream like something was tearing its way through her, not just out of her body, but out of reality itself. Thunder cracked directly overhead. The lights dimmed again. And then they stayed dim. "Backup generator's slow," a nurse muttered, but her voice shook. Daniel saw her glance toward the hallway, then whisper something to another nurse he couldn't hear. The room buzzed with tension. The overhead monitor whined sharply, then flatlined for a full second, just long enough for Daniel's heart to stop. Before it returned to normal, "Elijah's fine," the doctor said calmly. "We're almost there." And then it happened. The temperature plunged. Everyone's breath misted in the air. The metal instruments frosted at the edges. Mia screamed once more, and Elijah was born. But he didn't cry, not immediately. He opened his eyes. The room froze. No one spoke. No one moved. A dull pressure spread through Daniel's head, like he was deep underwater. Elijah's eyes, dark, too dark, locked on him. The pupils didn't look human. They didn't dilate. They stared, unblinking, ancient. Then came the smile, not a reflex, not a twitch. A slow, deliberate smile. Daniel stumbled back a step. His legs hit the edge of a chair. Something about that expression. It wasn't just unnatural. It was remembered. He'd seen it in the dream. Lucifer smiling as he fell. Mia didn't notice. She was exhausted, tearful, reaching for her child with trembling arms. The nurse hesitated for a moment before handing the baby over. Her hands were shaking. The lights returned brighter than before. Too bright. Machines reset. The cold vanished. Everything returned to normal. Or so it seemed. That night, back home, the nursery door wouldn't stay closed. Daniel checked the hinges, the latch, even jammed a chair under the knob. At 3:03 a.m., the door creaked open again. He stepped inside, flashlight in hand. Elijah was asleep in his crib. A music box played a lullaby it wasn't wound for. The air smelled faintly of ash. And then Daniel saw it. A single blackened feather resting on the windowsill. He picked it up. It crumbled to ash between his fingers. Back in bed, he held Mia's hand tightly. She was fast asleep, unaware of the door creaking open, the feather, the feeling in the air. But Daniel lay awake, staring into the darkness, heart pounding. He realized something awful. The dream hadn't stopped. It had just been born. 2 weeks passed. Elijah barely cried, never fussed, never screamed. Mia called it a blessing. Daniel called it wrong. Newborns were supposed to be loud, alive, chaotic. But Elijah just watched. His eyes followed everything. People, shadows, reflections. Even when Daniel tried to feed him, it felt like the child was studying him, not the other way around. It started small. The baby monitor would pick up voices. Not static, not interference. Whispers. Soft, layered voices speaking in what sounded like broken Latin or guttural Aramaic. Daniel recorded one night session and played it back in the morning. The playback had no sound, just silence. One evening, Daniel stood outside the nursery door, hand resting on the knob, listening. Mia was asleep. The house was quiet, except for the chanting, barely audible, like it was coming from inside the walls. He leaned closer. Arians, Phosphoros, Veniet, Lux. The knob was ice cold. He yanked the door open. Nothing. Just Elijah, wide awake, staring at the ceiling, hands folded neatly over his chest. Daniel's skin prickled. The child wasn't just awake. He looked aware, as though he knew Daniel was watching. He backed out slowly, pulling the door shut. The chanting stopped. Daniel called an electrician the next day, blaming the sounds on wiring. The man found nothing. No signal interference. No faulty circuits, but he did find something else. Burn marks inside the outlet closest to Elijah's crib. Looks like something blew from the inside out, the man said, frowning. That night, the mirror in the hallway shattered. There was no impact. No noise. Just a pop, and its spider web from the center. Like something exploded behind the glass. Daniel found himself staring at it for too long. At the reflection that didn't quite move when he did. A delay. A flicker. Like someone else was watching through the mirror. Mia began acting strange. She hummed lullabies Daniel had never heard. Old, chilling melodies that made him feel uneasy. He caught her talking to Elijah in hushed tones, saying things like, "You'll show them, won't you? You'll bring back the light." And when Daniel questioned her, she laughed it off, called him paranoid, blamed the lack of sleep. But Daniel wasn't sleeping. Not anymore. The dreams had stopped, yes. But now he saw pieces of them while awake, winged shadows in reflections, charred feathers falling behind glass, and eyes, always, the eyes, watching from Elijah's. Then came the final sign, undeniable. Daniel walked into the nursery at dusk, finding Elijah once again awake, quiet, unmoving. But this time, there were marks on the wall above the crib. Not drawn, not carved, branded, 3 overlapping circles, interlocking, smoking faintly. The wall around them was blistered and blackened, like the paint had been boiled away. Daniel rushed to Elijah, but the child was smiling. That slow, knowing smile. Daniel whispered, trembling, "What are you?" And the baby blinked once. Outside, the wind rose. The lights flickered, and the house breathed just once, like the lungs of something ancient stirring in its sleep. Daniel locked the nursery door that night and kept the key under his pillow. But somehow, in the morning, the door was open again, and Elijah was gone from the crib. Daniel found him in the hallway, sitting upright, eyes fixed on the broken mirror. Inside the cracked glass, something moved behind Daniel's reflection, and it smiled back. Daniel stopped going to work. He told his boss it was the baby. The truth was simpler. He was afraid to leave the house. Something was happening to Elijah. And to Mia, she wasn't the same. Her eyes had grown distant, serene, like someone watching a fire burn from far away. She spent hours rocking Elijah without blinking, humming that eerie lullaby. Sometimes she whispered in a language Daniel didn't recognize, one that felt wrong in her mouth, like a corpse trying to sing. Daniel turned to research. He read old texts, obscure forums, apocryphal theology. He started connecting dots no sane man would willingly follow. The 3 circles branded on the wall? An ancient sigil, older than Christianity, older than Babylon, referred to in only one place. Codex Malignum, an untranslated manuscript hidden away in the Vatican's forbidden library. But one phrase was known: 3 rings of fire, the mark of the dawn of ash. He thought it was a hoax until the letters came. No postage, no address. Just thick, rough parchment slipped under the front door while they slept. The first one read, "He is the bridge between heaven and the hollow. Guard him or perish." The second was worse. "You are merely the keeper. We are the believers." The third wasn't a letter. It was a photo, taken from inside the house. A blurred image of Daniel sleeping, Elijah in the crib, and in the corner of the frame, a shadowed figure. Too tall, no eyes. Daniel burned the photo. It didn't matter. The next morning, it was back, under his pillow. That night, the fire alarm went off, but there was no fire. Just the stench of burnt feathers and something more subtle, myrrh and decay. Daniel followed the smell to the garage. On the cement floor was a circle drawn in ash, with symbols burned into the concrete. At its center, a small porcelain doll with its eyes gouged out. Tied to its neck with twine was a note. "One soul for another. Keep him safe, or we will." Daniel smashed the doll, but it didn't break. It just laughed. A high, childlike giggle that echoed long after it should have stopped. Mia became unreachable. She spoke less, slept during the day, stayed up with Elijah all night, rocking him in the dark. Daniel began sleeping in the guest room. The hallway between them felt longer with each passing night. Then one night, Daniel caught her praying over Elijah, not to God, but to someone else. "Morning star, may your light return. May the fire of heaven fall again." He confronted her, screamed, demanded to know where she learned those words. She simply looked up at him, tears streaming down her face, and said, They're already here, Daniel. They've always been here, watching, waiting, and now they're ready. The next morning, Daniel found his lawn covered in dead birds. Not torn or eaten, burned. Each of them had their wings scorched off cleanly, as though by divine heat, and carved into the earth beneath them in perfect symmetry. The 3 interlocking rings. Daniel tried calling the police. The line cut out. He drove to the station himself, desperate, grasping at sanity. But by the time he arrived, the evidence was gone. No photos, no letters, no doll. His phone was wiped. And the officer at the desk? He just smiled at Daniel like he knew everything, then said, "You should go home. The child is waiting." Daniel drove back through a fog that hadn't been there before. The sun never rose that morning, and when he stepped into the house, everything was too quiet. Mia was sitting in the living room, rocking Elijah slowly. Her eyes were vacant, glowing faintly in the dark, and on the wall behind her, scrawled in soot, "The light falls again. The cult wasn't coming." They were already inside, and Elijah was beginning to remember. Daniel couldn't sleep, not because of the whispers or the shadows that moved wrong in the corners of his vision, but because of the feeling, the knowing, that this had all happened before. He sat in the attic surrounded by boxes of old photographs and dusty documents inherited from his late father. He'd never really cared to look through them before. But now it felt like every page held a clue, a warning, a scream buried in silence. He opened a yellowed photo album. Half the pictures were missing, ripped out violently. In the remaining ones, his father stood stone-faced, always near a church or a grave, and always holding a child. Never Daniel. Another child. One Daniel had never known existed. At 3:03 a.m., he found what he didn't know he was searching for. A letter, hidden inside a hollowed-out Bible. The pages had been burned around the edges, the text soaked with what looked like dried blood. It was addressed not to Daniel, but to his father, written in frantic, jagged handwriting. "You should never have kept him." The prophecy demanded sacrifice, not defiance. Now the bloodline is fractured, and the watchers are angry. You can't protect what was born to return. The morning star falls through your seed. Let it end here, or they will come for him, for all of us. There was no signature, only 3 interlocking circles at the bottom. Daniel's hands trembled. He checked the birth records. There was another child, his older brother, stillborn, according to the hospital. But no grave existed, no death certificate, only a sealed file and a cold trail. He called his estranged uncle in desperation, a man who hadn't spoken to the family in over 15 years. The call lasted only seconds. As soon as Daniel mentioned the baby, his uncle whispered, "They took him." He opened his eyes during the baptism and hung up. The next day, Daniel returned to the attic. The photo album was gone. In its place, a new letter. This one, handwritten in ornate, elegant penmanship. "We watched your father fail. We watched your brother burn. But now, you have done well. He lives. He grows. The lineage is purified. The fire will not fail this time." Daniel fled the house that night, carrying Elijah in his arms. He didn't trust Mia. He didn't trust anyone. He drove until dawn, through small towns and empty roads, ending at a roadside motel in the middle of nowhere. Elijah never cried, but he stared at Daniel through the rearview mirror, calm and still. And Daniel swore, for a second. His eyes were glowing with faint golden fire. In the motel, he scoured his father's journals for answers. They told a hidden story, that every generation of their bloodline had birthed a child with the mark, that the angels knew, that the cult, the dawn of Ash, had been tracking their family since the 1500s. Each generation had a child with impossible eyes. Each one was taken, killed, or used. His father had tried to break the cycle by hiding, by going off-grid, changing names, severing ties. But the prophecy was patient. And now, Daniel realized with sickening clarity, he wasn't chosen randomly. He was bred. At dawn, Daniel stepped outside for air. Etched into the windshield of his car were 3 words scorched into the glass. He remembers now. The dreams came back, but now they didn't wait for sleep. Daniel would blink and find himself elsewhere, standing on clouds that cracked like glass beneath his feet, staring into the abyss where heaven once shone. The sky bled golden light. Trumpets screamed backward, and far below, Elijah stood at the base of a shattered throne, wings made of shadow unfurling from his back. He was always smiling. Back in the motel, Daniel woke with blood on his pillow. His nose, his ears, both bleeding. His veins felt hot, his breath sharp with iron. Elijah lay in the crib beside him, wide-eyed, hands folded perfectly on his chest, like he was attending his own funeral. A line of ash had formed around the crib. Perfect. Circular. Unbroken. Daniel began recording everything, sketching the dreams, writing down every phrase he could remember. The same symbols kept appearing, circles, wings, flames, swallowing a star. He cross-referenced them with texts from forbidden theology forums. They weren't symbols of damnation. They were seals. Each dream he had wasn't just a warning. It was a release, 1 seal per dream. 1 memory unlocked, and he was the key. Mia called. Her voice was strange. Too calm, too slow. You can't keep him away forever, Daniel. He knows where he belongs. He doesn't belong anywhere, Daniel said. He's a baby. No, he's a god. You just haven't accepted it yet. He's our son. No, he's not. He never was. The line cut out. Seconds later, someone knocked on the motel room door. Daniel didn't answer. The knocking never repeated. But when he checked through the peephole, there was no one there. Just a doll nailed to the doorframe. The same porcelain doll from before. Its mouth had been stitched shut. And carved across its torso, Seal 6, the blood of the dreamer. Daniel ran. Another motel. Another state. Every night a new bed. A new hallucination. But the dreams grew worse. He stood beside an angel bound in chains of molten gold, its mouth torn open, eyes replaced with burning candles. It whispered, "Your blood broke the gate, and now the wind remembers his name." He screamed himself awake and found his own hands, scrawled with glowing script that pulsed and burned. He ran them under cold water until the skin blistered. The words didn't wash off. Elijah began speaking. Not in words, just sounds at first, echoes, fragments, names Daniel had only heard in dreams. Ancient names, Asmodeus, Shem-Hazai, Abaddon. When he looked them up, each one was an angel that had fallen, and one more name surfaced again and again. Haloban Shahar, the morning star, Lucifer. On the 7th night, Daniel awoke choking, his mouth full of ash. Elijah was floating, just above the crib, eyes open, arms out, his body bathed in flickering gold light like fire seen through water. The room pulsed with an inaudible hum, deep and ancient. The shadows on the walls bent toward the crib, like iron shavings pulled to a magnet. Daniel dropped to his knees. He didn't remember doing it, didn't remember praying, but his mouth moved anyway, and Elijah turned to look at him, smiled, and whispered, "One more seal." When Daniel woke the next morning, Elijah was in the crib again, sleeping peacefully, as if nothing had happened, except Daniel's wrists were scorched. 2 perfect rings encircling them, like shackles made of fire. He had 1 dream left, 1 seal remaining, and when it broke, there would be no more dreams, only awakening. Daniel drove without direction, hands trembling on the wheel, windshield streaked with ash from a sky that should have been clear. Elijah hadn't spoken since that night, But he hadn't stopped staring. The baby seat in the back felt more like a throne now. Daniel could barely glance at the rearview mirror without feeling like he was being judged by something older than time. He didn't know where he was going until he realized he'd already arrived. The old church, abandoned, crumbling, swallowed by woods that had no name on any map. He hadn't been here since he was a child, maybe younger. His father used to take him here in the dead of night, whispering prayers in a language Daniel never understood. But now, standing before it, he remembered, this is where the last offering was made. This is where his brother was taken. The church's doors were chained shut, but the chains fell away at his touch, as though recognizing him. The air inside was thick with dust and incense. Candles lit themselves as he walked down the aisle, and standing at the altar, waiting, was them. The cult, dozens of them. Hooded figures with their hands clasped in reverence, robes marked with the triple ring sigil. Some were whispering, some were crying, and in the center, the high priest stepped forward, his face bare, serene, glowing with quiet madness. "Welcome, Keeper," he said softly. "You've done well, far better than your father." Daniel held Elijah tight against his chest. "He's just a baby." The high priest tilted his head. "No, he's a key. And the door is almost open." Daniel shook his head. "You're not getting him. You've already given him," the priest replied gently. "Every dream, every seal, you broke them. Your love for him, your defiance, it's what awoke him." Behind the priest, a stone altar began to glow. Symbols lit up in pulsating red, blood-warm and wet. "He must remember who he is," the priest whispered. "And the final seal requires the blood of the dreamer." Daniel stepped back. "I'm not giving you anything." "You already did," said a voice behind him. Mia. She stood in the doorway, hands stained with ash, her eyes now mirrors of Elijah's, dark and endless, reflecting falling stars. "I've been preparing him," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "And you were the last piece." Elijah reached up and touched Daniel's cheek. And in that moment, Daniel saw everything: the war in heaven, the betrayal, the fire, the fall, and the moment Lucifer landed in the void, whispering into time itself. "One day I will return in flesh, and I will be born through the line of the man who watches me fall." That man was Daniel. He wasn't just a father, he was the witness. He was the one who saw Lucifer's fall in his dreams, because his soul had seen it firsthand, countless lives ago. And now the seal within him, the last one, was beginning to tear. He ran. He didn't make it far. The cult didn't stop him. Mia didn't chase. It was Elijah. The child blinked once, and Daniel froze. Every muscle in his body locked as fire flooded his veins. He collapsed onto the stone floor, convulsing. His vision dimmed. Blood filled his mouth. The high priest stepped over him, gentle, reverent. "This is not death, Daniel. This is sacrifice." And with that, the altar pulsed. A trumpet blast rang out. Not from the earth, but from beneath it. The final seal shattered. And Elijah opened his mouth, not to cry, but to speak. "I have returned." Daniel's last breath escaped his lips as light poured from his eyes and mouth, searing his body from the inside. Mia held Elijah to her chest, smiling through tears. The cult dropped to their knees, and the boy, no longer a child, stepped forward on his own, not crawling, walking. Lucifer had returned, but not to punish, not to rage, to rebuild, to reclaim, to remake the world in his image. The next day, the world didn't end. That would have been easier. Instead, it changed subtly, like a hairline fracture forming beneath a polished floor. No explosions, no angels in the sky, no trumpets screaming from the clouds, just silence. The Vatican's bell tower missed its first toll in 600 years. Pilots flying above the Atlantic reported hearing nothing. Not the engine, not wind, not even the static of radio. 3 major churches across Europe burned overnight. But when firefighters arrived, the flames were cold, and the crosses had turned upside down, not melted, but withered like dying trees. And in all of it, no response from heaven, no signs, no visions, no miracles, only silence. Elijah, no longer simply a child, walked freely now, accompanied by the faithful of the dawn of ash. His appearance changed with each passing hour. He still bore the face of an infant, but his eyes had aged beyond stars. His presence warped the air around him. Mirrors refused to reflect him. Dogs howled from miles away, and the devout fell to their knees in agony when he passed. The cult did not worship him. They obeyed him. In the shadows of the church where Daniel died, the high priest stood beside Elijah as news reports flashed across a dozen cracked screens. Disasters, silence, chaos with no cause. "This is the beginning," the priest whispered. "The breaking down of the lie." Elijah looked up at him, calm. "They will not stop me. They cannot. Heaven is quiet because heaven is empty." The priest's lips trembled. "You mean—" "They abandoned you," Elijah said, voice like velvet over a blade. "Long ago. They feared what I would become. And so they watched from afar, bound by oaths too fragile to matter." He looked at his tiny hands. "I was made in their light, but I was forged in their shame." In the days that followed, a televangelist burst into flame during a live broadcast while condemning false messiahs. A priest in Argentina slit his own throat mid-sermon after declaring he could hear God weeping. And in Jerusalem, a blind boy was found in the Wailing Wall's tunnel, whispering the same phrase over and over, "The morning star walks among us." And still, no word from heaven, no thunder, no signs, no judgment. Only the eerie, unnatural quiet of something divine choosing to look away. Meanwhile, deep underground, Mia bathed Elijah in black water, reciting an incantation from a book Daniel had once buried. Her voice was steady. Her hands glowed with unseen fire. She no longer smiled with motherly warmth, but with reverence. "You were never born to fall," she whispered to him. "You were born to rise." And Elijah, Lucifer, smiled up at her, the way he once smiled in the delivery room. The smile of something that never forgot where it came from. Daniel Reyes was dead, burned from the inside by divine fire, his body left behind in the altar chamber, unrecognizable to anyone but the cult who stood vigilantly over his ashes. And yet, he dreamed. He stood in a field of white wings, torn and broken. They carpeted the ground like snow, some still twitching, others burned to bone. Above him, a black sun pulsed in slow, haunting rhythm. Time moved strangely here. Not forward, not back, just around. Daniel looked down and saw the blade. The same one from his dreams. The same one he had failed to use. It was glowing now, faintly, but alive. Waiting, he picked it up. It burned his hand but did not harm him. Then a voice, not Elijah's, not Lucifer's, whispered behind him. It was never meant to kill him. Daniel turned. An angel stood in the distance, shackled in rusted gold chains, wings pinned to the earth by spears of light. Its face was blurred, shifting, like it existed across 1,000 lives. "The knife is a key," it whispered. "Your love forged it. Your death completed it. You are the lock. He is the door." Daniel stepped toward the angel. "Then I still have a purpose?" "You never lost it." Suddenly, Daniel awoke. Not in the world. Not in heaven. Not in hell. But in the between, a thin space, purgatory built for prophets. A place for those who saw too much, felt too deeply, and died unfinished. The blade was still in his hand. Meanwhile, on earth, Elijah grew stronger. His voice now carried weight, literal gravity. When he spoke, the air bent. Those who heard it wept or bled or bowed. His cult had grown to hundreds, thousands, online, underground, hidden behind false charities and spiritual movements. The world still didn't know his name, but they felt him. Children drew pictures of him without knowing why. Earthquakes mirrored the rhythm of his breath, and heaven remained silent. But then came the ripple, one of the cult's inner sanctums. The place where Daniel's body had been cremated suddenly collapsed. The altar split, the ash turned to salt, and in the center of the ruined room, left like a message scorched into the stone, were 5 words. "I am not finished yet." The high priest fell to his knees, screaming. Elijah simply smiled. "A knife can wound," he said calmly, "even after the hand is gone." In the between, Daniel was changing. His body glowed with cracks of white light, like something divine trying to burst through human flesh. His eyes saw through time. He understood now that he could not stop Lucifer from returning, but he could delay him. He could wound the god. He could reach through the dreams one final time. He raised the knife, and the sky above the between split open with screaming light. He was going back. Elijah stood at the center of the ruined cathedral, once a forgotten relic in the woods. Now a throne room wrapped in shadow and fire. The high priest knelt before him. Cult members lined the pews, eyes hollow with devotion, mouths chanting in a language no human should have remembered. Their voices weren't just loud. They warped the air, pulling storm clouds low into the earth, bending sound and time. Above them, the sky churned red. Not from sunset. From rupture, the final seal was broken. The veil between heaven and earth was shredded like rotted silk, and Lucifer, no longer just Elijah, was waking fully. His body glowed from within, his skin cracked with divine heat. Wings made of shadow and light burst from his back, stretching across the cathedral like storm-born cathedrals. Across the world, signs ignited. Crosses wept blood in empty churches. A Vatican archivist tore his eyes out while screaming the morning star's name. Children in 3 continents began speaking fluent Enochian, though they'd never learned to talk. And in one moment, thousands of satellites blacked out, broadcasting only a single whispering phrase. "I remember." But deep in the between, Daniel had returned, not to life, not to earth, but into Lucifer's dream. He emerged in the shattered memory where it all began. Blazing sky, falling angels, and the scream of eternity fracturing. This time, Daniel held the knife. And this time, Lucifer turned to face him. Not as a baby, not as a child, but as what he truly was, a celestial being crowned in fire and sorrow. "You should not be here," Lucifer said, voice vibrating with power. "I never left," Daniel replied. "You brought me with you. Every dream, every seal. You died," Lucifer said. Daniel stepped forward. But love doesn't. He raised the knife and plunged it, not into Lucifer's heart, but into his memory. The world above shuddered. Lucifer staggered. Reality rippled. For a brief moment, the clouds above the cathedral broke, and light, pure and holy, poured through. The cult screamed. Some burst into flame. Others went blind. The high priest clawed at his face, muttering, "He's breaking. He's breaking." And Lucifer screamed, not in rage, but in betrayal. The knife had cut not his body, but the anchor, the human thread that tethered his return. Daniel's sacrifice hadn't been in vain. It had delayed him, weakened him, but not stopped him. Lucifer knelt, one wing shriveled, eyes burning with white fire. He stared into the dark horizon where heaven had once watched from afar. "I offered peace," he whispered. "I offered love. You chose silence." He rose slowly, towering and broken, but smiling. "I will not burn the world. I will reshape it. They will not worship me as a god. They will follow me as a father. The cult gathered what was left of his power. The altar was rebuilt. The first church of the new dawn opened its doors the next day. No crosses, no scripture. Only 3 interlocking rings carved in obsidian. And far beneath the ruined cathedral, buried in stone and blood, something still flickered in the dark. Daniel's soul, watching, waiting, because though Lucifer had returned, so had he, and the war between heaven and hell had just begun.